The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Double O today.
That's like believing that you understand Los Angeles if you have the telephone directory. You know? I mean, this is the level of genetics today. What they say they understand life, and they have the telephone directory, and they're talking about Los Angeles because they can look up, you know, where the genes are, the coding for the proteins. You know, does this tell us anything about a broken heart or a Messiah or a Hitler? I don't think so. So what we are trying to do is return the focus of attention to individual experience. We have been slave too long to ideology transmitted hierarchically and based on a tremendously alienating instrumentality. That's what science depends on now, a tremendously alienating instrumentality. What we need to do is empower experience. Well, this is where the psychedelics come in, because citizens don't take psychedelics because it's illegal. Neither do marionettes, neither do robots. None of these well-behaved and mechanistic reductionist images of humanity take psychedelics because it's misbehaving. Misbehaving is a great sin. In fact, it's enshrined as the first sin. You'll regard that the psychedelic issue was there in Eden and somebody misbehaved, and then they got tossed out forever and their children's children into the chaos of history. It's interesting to read in Genesis why this was. It was because they will become as we are, says Yahweh. They will become as we are if they eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge.
They say we're young and we don't know. We won't find out until we grow. I don't know if all that's true, 'cause you got me and baby, I got you. Babe,
And that spells it the best in fine stereo.
Alan,
Ladies and gentlemen,
you're having a nightmare. What if it's true?
ladies and gentlemen,
Alan, it's a possibility, isn't it?
the very word secrecy is repugnant
Secrets.
in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers
Constant, extreme danger.
which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger
Extreme danger.
that an announced need for increased security
What the hell is going on? This is Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park.
will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
You're crazy.
And no officious, high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes.
Isn't the Pentagon suspicious that all the building would blow up?
Or to withhold from the press and the public
I think you're just looking at things for the first time.
the facts they deserve to know.
You've had your whole f***ing life to think things over. What good's a few minutes more gonna do you now?
The facts they deserve to know. They deserve to know. Deserve to know. Deserve to know.
Welcome to episode 119 and 47 of Green Crush Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park.
Facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to episode 119 and 47. It's an Eggplant Digital Media creation. It's Eggplant Digital Media, some of the most innovative and exciting digital media out there. And when I say out there, I mean out here, of course. In the calm space. Man, it's hot out and I'm loving it. There's people that get really upset about the heat. But I find that it comes so quickly on the heels of the freezing cold that it doesn't bother me at all. It's like I've been waiting for it. So here we are at Eggplant Digital Media again, 234 King Street East in Toronto at the Pacific Function Hotel. I'll get to that later. It's Eggplant Digital Media, some of the most innovative and exciting digital media out there. And did you know there's a full shooting schedule or recording schedule or both, like you're watching now, end to end? We got daytime programs all the way through. Every morning in the weekdays are kicked off by Mike Richards, raw Mike Richards. And I don't even know who else is on, but we have Your Hood's a Joke. That's a good show, and a lot of other shows. So we're going to have to get some of that information together so that I can talk about it on the show. This is not the only good show that comes out of this particular organization of information freaks. So check us out. This is where we are at 234 King Street East in the Pacific Junction Hotel, the hotel for your specific function. Is that too vague? Pacific Junction specific function? Is that you get that, right? Well, the food's great and you meet fun people. That's the main thing. Our guest today on Green Crush Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park he's an author. You know, and I could just leave it at that. I could leave it at that because I'd like to be an author, and I'm not an author, and I should be an author, and one day, hopefully, I'll be an author. But this guy's more than an author. He's a results-oriented operational leader. What does that mean? Well, he's had 50 years of experience in the entertainment industry. So his book, his writings are about the entertainment industry, specifically the music industry. We have John Hartmann in today. John is the brother of Paul Hartmann, who is the gun on the show here. We get him on once in a while. Sometimes he comes to the city. He's a good friend. And his brother is John Hartmann. Of course, John is the older of the two and the eldest of the three. Of course, Phil Hartmann, who's no longer with us, being the middle brother. So John, this whole family has been deeply involved in all things Hollywood and California, from Paul's growing stuff and moving it around. And by that, I mean, cannabis. And then we have here, John is, he was recently, it was a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, he got the Heller Award. That's a lifetime achievement in management in Hollywood. It's a crystal trophy, and it was presented by his very first client, Jenny Clyde. And you might remember her. She was in the rock duo Chad and Jenny. Well, you'd have to be old to remember her because, that was a long time ago. But that was the British invasion of Chad and Jenny. But and John also teaches. He is at the Musicians Institute in Hollywood. That's when he started anyway. He's the founder of the Holodyne, an internet company engaged in the creation and execution of the new music industry paradigm. The Holodyne is to ensure that the next generation of music belongs to those who make it. And it will raise a series of questions I've wanted to have answered for a long, long time about music and concerts and holo something else. So John will be on shortly. And of course, he will be speaking to some measure about cannabis, because why else would he be on the show? You can't just be a family member. I don't have Devin is in here right now as our operator while Russell's away. I don't have Devin's mom come down here and have a chat, right? She's not involved in this. Sure, she's a wonderful woman. Maybe she is involved. Who knows? What am I saying? She could be the mother on weeds. Who knows? But so that's who's on today. John Hartmann, he'll be on shortly. Now remember, as for government-sponsored personal minister profit models, boycott all government weed. That's the message here at the show. Consume it where you choose to. Whichever weed you want to have. Choose that and have it where you're going to have it, within reason. Don't blow smoke in people's faces. That's why these other folks had to draw up those laws. But vape and oil yourself to contentment. I had a phone call with a friend the other day, or a text back and forth. He showed me a letter from his condominium board. Apparently the place that he owns is telling him that he won't be able to smoke cannabis inside of his apartment that he's dropped well north of $300,000 to live inside of. And to this I say, don't get too hung up about that. Learn how to vape and edibles. You don't really need to smoke. It's probably not the best way. And considering it burns off somewhere in the neighborhood of 85% of all the goodness that is a cannabis experience, just vape. Which is another fantastic way to say to hell with your condominium board telling you can't partake of a medicine and or a recreational item. Everybody's so precious about this. Remember, we have this government that tells us on the one hand it's dangerous, and on the other hand we don't have enough information to know anything about it. You can't have those two brains in the same body. It doesn't work that way. So vape. Understand what vaping is. Boy, there's some good vaporizers out there. I know one that I use is called the Shatterizer. It's so good that I have two of them. I do. I have two of them. One of them is for shatter, and the other one is for the oil that I sometimes medicate myself with. The black, tarry Rick Simpson goop that pulled my scraggly ass from the edge of a grave, only to deposit me this far on the other side of it. And it's such a different world now than when I was going down in flames. I can't believe it. So it's kind of every day is a bit of a surprise to me, and bonus time of craziness. But anyway, do that. Don't listen to Julian Fantino and Bill Blair and all of these other people that are granting you permission to use something that they've already put dozens, perhaps hundreds, perhaps thousands of people in jail for. And now they're going to profit from it. So to hell with them. Obtain your own quality seeds, not yet infected by the metastases going on with the Bayer-Monsanto merger. Come on, that's an antitrust. Very much need an antitrust suit there. Bayer and Monsanto merging. I don't know exactly what level that is at, but it is unspeakable. So it shouldn't be at any other level other than, boy, thank goodness that's not happening. So make sure it doesn't. Fight it the best way you can. Find out about it. Don't let them influence your shopping needs and abilities. And certainly don't let them lobby their way into being the only available kind of weed some 8, 6, 10, 15 years down the road. Grow your own plant once you've gotten your own seed. Consume the plant as food. Consume it as a tea. Consume it as a regular component of salad. Forget kale and iceberg lettuce. This plant is food. Grow it. Eat it. Vape it. Convert it into oil. And take control of your own health, your own way, your own life. And away from these obsessed and obsessive control freak pigs. And by that I don't just mean the police that would arrest you for having it. I mean anybody that would give you a hard time for having it. Because, if you want to consume it in a social setting, as we are encouraged to do with alcohol, which is a depressant, do that with your cannabis. Have a party. Create a floating speakeasy system in your town to help keep the cops running around your town and failing miserably at finding where you're at. Just keep moving it around. We always, these resistance people that don't seem to be able to fully get the message across to these alleged overlords that we're going to be having this on our own time and our own measure. And it's really criminal to do it any other way. There's no real representation to any of this. None. We'll get into that in a future show. We got some of those shows coming up. They're constitutionally themed shows. Doesn't that sound exciting? Oh my. But it goes to show you that it works to expose the fact that the entire structure that we give our ascension to, that we allow to rise and rule over us, is not really rooted in anything beyond you just going along with it. So you don't necessarily need to do that. Let's get into some news. There's been some big news, and I always love when there's news in Hamilton, because Hamilton is the best. So we're moving on to Hamilton. Okay, so what's going on in Hamilton? And this comes to us from the CBC. All right, from July 9th, the Hamilton police shut down dozens of pot dispensaries. And all but 2 reopened again. That's right, folks. That's the way it's always going to go. It's always going to go that way. You're going to try to repress us, and we're going to go, boom, take it on the chin and open it up somewhere else. You're never going to win. The reason we're at this juncture now is because that maxim was always true. And now you're just dilly-dallying and being dicks about it. It says that it's a clear sign the city of Hamilton is losing its battle against illegal. Now remember, when we say this, that it's only the words of the people who want to take control of cannabis across the board that are calling it illegal. Okay, these are all cast spells. All right, so just be careful when you're reading or listening to anything, really. It's a battle that they are losing against illegal marijuana dispensaries. Now, again, they should be calling it cannabis. Every time police or the city try to shut one down, the new numbers show, they just open it back up again. Lloyd Ferguson, Ancaster councillor and chair of the Police Services Board, says police have shut down 42 dispensaries. Now remember, this is a little another window to how nuts this is. Hamilton is a nice little town in Ontario, and Ontario is planning to open 40 stores between October 18th and October 18th, 2019. They're going to get 40 stores open across a very large geographical mass, and right now there are 42 stores in Hamilton that were shut down, and 40 of them have reopened. And I think the odds are good that the other 2 will also reopen. City efforts aren't much better. It's because it's unsustainable, you fucking idiots. You can't do this. We're just going to keep rolling out our freedoms. Bylaw staff. Oh, God, how do you even drag yourself out of bed in the morning when you realize you're part of a collective known as a bylaw staff? Ugh. They've identified 80 dispensaries in total. So there's 80 now. There's twice as many dispensaries in this small town of Hamilton than there are going to be across the entire province. I keep saying this because it's not my idea. It's stupid AF. And I just don't understand why more people don't realize how far down the garden path we're all being led. 33 that the authorities managed to close. Most of them just moved to a different location and reopened. That shows the system isn't working. Leandertz says. Leandertz. I'm sorry about that name. Ken Leandertz. Leandertz? Probably Dutch. You got two E's there. Leandertz. The city tries to use existing rules to crack down, including whether a building is zoned properly or whether edibles are stored, but that's all it can do until the province either makes dispensaries legal or gives them better tools. Like more money for cops and a police state. That'd be a good idea. I wonder if they've even considered that. The city needs the ability to issue heavy enough fines to act as a deterrent. Until then, the process of trying to close a dispensary is long and labor-intensive and morally reprehensible. They left that part out. I added that part in there. Okay, so what else is in the news? This has to be covered. We have to get to this. Thank you very much, Forbes magazine. This is the magazine for people with far more monetary means than I have. I can tell you that for sure. Here it is. Here's a great article. It's on Forbes. It's called Why Synthetic Marijuana is More Dangerous Than Ever. Okay, so you read this. It says, last week, New York City television footage showed young men slumped over chairs while others were dazed and wandering the sidewalks and streets. One was inexplicably prancing around with a bowling ball. Another was hunched over and holding onto his bicycle. A man who broadcast the street view on Facebook Live said it looked like a scene out of a zombie movie. In the Bronx and Brooklyn's Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood, more than 130 people were hospitalized with what's being described as overdoses of K2 or spice, an intoxicant widely described as synthetic marijuana. We talked about this spice before. It makes your eyes bleed and stuff, right? So it's a really dangerous thing. And the other reason is not just spice, but synthesizing cannabis. It cannot. It will not. It doesn't provide any of the positive benefits and the relief of actually taking in the plant. And when I say it doesn't bring any benefit at all for the synthetic version, the only place I'm not correct about that is, of course, the bank accounts and the ledgers of the companies that provide those synthetic drugs. These people have also been fighting cannabis, but just remember, synthetic marijuana, that's not what we're talking about. Never take that stuff. It's garbage. And besides, when things really shake out the way they're supposed to be, weed is only $2-3 a gram, not even, in some places, right, Oregon? So, you have to... You have to understand that this whole thing is a ruse. This is just a way for people to make money, and it doesn't work. And we've had all these spice attacks, and so, public message of the show, don't take synthetic marijuana. Okay, so why is synthetic marijuana so addictive and dangerous? Well, in herb.co, yes, Herb, it contains none of the natural cannabinoids found in the real thing. The dirty little secret is that one reason synth marijuana probably shouldn't be referred to as marijuana at all. Make no mistake about it, the high is different from actual cannabis, as are the potential dangers. Synthetic cannabinoid analogs, often known as full agonists for the CB1 and CB2 receptors in the brain and other places in your body. THC and the rest of the natural cannabinoids found in marijuana, on the other hand, are only partial agonists. This means that when it comes to effects that synthetic cannabinoids have greatly exaggerated effects compared to cannabis. It also means that synthetic marijuana lends itself more easily to abuse than real weed, and unfortunately means that unlike the real stuff, it can actually kill you. Now, this is where the science is. You want to get on the science. You want to understand the science about this. This is a recent article from May 9th of this year, 2018. Well, what has the government got to say about all this? What are we going to find out about them? What's their position on we know where they're at with real weed, and Terrence McKenna talked about it at the beginning of the show. They don't want us all lapping and happily munching out on the fruits of the tree of good and evil, knowledge of good and evil. Okay, so let's find out from last year in Vice News. Says here that the DEA, that's the Drug Enforcement Agency, this is just late last year, 7 months ago or so. The DEA has officially decided that a notorious fentanyl manufacturer's synthetic marijuana product is safer and more medicinally valuable than actual weed. So, I mean, here we go with the lies again. Are you with me? So we just understood how this shit's poison. And now we have the most recent position of the government of the United States, the Drug Enforcement Agency, is telling you this stuff that can bleed out of your eyes is, it's not as bad as you think. In an announcement posted in the Federal Register, the DEA announced that the drug Syndrose, a liquid form of synthetic THC, will be classified as a Schedule II controlled substance, meaning it can be legally prescribed by doctors. We live in a society of demons, okay? That is just about what it is. I'm sure there's a 10% psychopath count on the population in general, and they're spread out there, and it's always a problem for the 90 rest of us. But when it comes to finding the halls of power, these folks are driven to it. And so just because we have 5 or 3 or 10% psychopaths wandering around just outside this window, no offense. Come here, sir, you're a psychopath. We don't know exactly how many are out there, but there are far more aggregated into the halls of power. Okay, so like for example, listen to this guy.
New cannabis fines have been released, and unlike alcohol, cannabis retailers face penalties that are fixed, and in some cases, higher.
Yeah, it's higher than, a lot of these cases are higher than alcohol. Now, that's not just a pun on cannabis getting you high. Here we have a politician now. I know it's only in one half. That's okay. He's going to explain some of this.
Cannabis is new.
Pardon? I'm sorry? What was that, fucko? Cannabis is new? Don Morgan, this guy's a fella. He's a politician in Saskatchewan. Look him up. Cannabis is new. I think what he means is it's new as a legalized substance. So that doesn't really mean that you've got a purview over it that's just. But go on.
We're worried about what the effect might be, so we're starting with a higher penalty structure. Alcohol is something that's been around for as long as the province has been in existence, and it's something where people have got a greater understanding and acceptance, and marijuana is something new, so we want to have a greater disincentive, at least at the beginning.
Okay, so just at the beginning. So if we can hold any of these wannabe, arbiters of justice to their point, after a little bit of time, we should be able to shake them down into opening things up to a little bit more than this parochial nonsense they've got it set to right now. But we know why they're trying to keep it away from us. I mean, we talked about that. They want to keep it away from us. They want to tax it. They want to tell us how dangerous it is. And every once in a while, some information comes to the fore that belittles that notion. Here's one. Going to get to our guest in a minute, but hang on. This is in the Toronto Star. The chief medical officer calls for decriminalization of all drugs for personal use. What? The chief medical officer of what? Toronto, pretty big city in North America, calling for decriminalization of all drugs for personal use. Now we're getting somewhere. Bill Blair. Toronto's medical officer of health is pushing for the decriminalization of all drugs for personal use as part of a shift to a public health approach to overdose prevention. In the midst of a deadly and worsening crisis, Dr. Eileen Davila, or could be Davia, is urging the city's Board of Health to call on the federal government to decriminalize possession of drugs for personal use while scaling up prevention, harm, and reduction in treatment services, as opposed to arresting and busting services where they hurt people and take their money and ruin their families like the police like to do. She's also recommending Ottawa convene a task force made up of people who use drugs. Holy shit! What a great idea! Not just go to the cops right away? Medical officer, not just go to the police and ask them how they're going to reschedule their income if cannabis isn't a bust-worthy substance anymore? Oh, wow. Yeah, you should have tried that in Ottawa before, folks. The first people they're going to ask are the people who use them. Great. Alongside experts in policy and healthcare and human rights and mental health and criminal justice experts. See, that's how the list needs to run. You don't go to a cop first and ask a cop to redesign the structure of how the cannabis system's going to run when all of a sudden him and his boys are going to have dozens, uncountable hours on the ledger where they're not arresting people. Ergo, it's time to shave off that many cops on the roster. I mean, you don't even need a budget as high as you've got it anymore. Let's stop kidding ourselves. You don't need as many cops. You don't have as many hours if you really go to legal. That's what these punks are all upset about. And they don't want us to have the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Whether you like that metaphorically or literally. So she wants to put money into scaling prevention and harm and harm reduction and treatment services. That makes sense, huh? She's also recommending that task force be made of people who use drugs. Might even ask them why they were using it, right? They might even ask me, like if I was to be asked by this doctor, she would say, well, why are you using it? Why did you use it? Did you find it cut into your existence? Did you find that you weren't very productive with it? And I would say, well, no, I was going to find out I was fucking dead without it. So thanks for asking me first, and then experts in policy. We'll get to you later. And then healthcare, because you've been denying things and buttressing the pharmaceutical industry. And then human rights. Well, we should move that a little closer up, but thanks for considering it at all. And then mental health and criminal justice experts. Mental health experts, because we need to definitely take care of people in that situation. But again, we also don't need to be told that their particular pharmacy is the only way out of these particular situations. I'm going to talk about ibogaine later on. Look that up. Ibogaine. To explore options for the legal regulation of all drugs in Canada. God love her. Those are the positions detailed in a new report entitled A Public Health Approach to Drug Policy that will be presented to the city's health board, and I'm sure it's already in the garbage can. I'm sure it is already in the garbage can, but we'll see. I'll try to I'm going to keep that on my little pegboard of things I'm supposed to do, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit, because I want to make sure that gets followed up. This is the continuing conversation, Kathleen Wynne, that you bailed out of. Zero spine in that woman. None. Okay, so that's our previous getting off on a rant here. I just don't miss her, that's all. Even though the guy that's in there now, we'll talk about him later, I'm sure. Anyway, that's the news, and then we're going to bring on our guest now. What do you think? On the phone, we're going to pass on that right now. He's on the phone. Did I say my lawyer is on the phone? Oh my goodness. He is on the phone. You know, you're going to get in trouble, and it's going to happen at some point with this whole cannabis mess. You know, I don't think I'm out of the woods on that at all. Let me just mention this to you right now, that you may find yourself in some kind of cannabis trouble, and that will suck, because here at Green Crush and Green Crush Conspiracy Queries, we've been telling you the new system's been screwed for over a year now. And some of you, well, you're only now learning of the draconian rollout of this particular cannabis act. You're only now finding out about it. You're only finding out it's nothing more than boiling hot pig gravy being poured over the castle walls onto the just citizens, the rightful citizens. And these guys have gamed the system. So if you find yourself on the short end of the stick and you need a lawyer, a real one who deals with cannabis, not the one who untangles you from a lying black widow, but I mean, the one where you got busted for some kind of weed thing, it's possible that this will be the only guy you need at that point. I hope it never happens to you, but it's possible you may wind up getting yourself involved with Harrison Jordan. He's an attorney at law in Ontario. He studied the weed laws, and he knows them better than you.
Hurt in a car? Do not call me. Get caught smoking a bong while driving on the 401? I may be able to help. Hi, I'm Harrison Jordan, and whether you find yourself on the wrong side of the pot law, or you'd like to start a business in the legal marijuana industry, you need someone who understands Canada's cannabis laws. So call me today at
1-855-420-LAW. 1-855-420-LAW.
All right, Harrison Jordan making his own commercials. He just got called to the bar. Now he's making his own commercials. I believe he's singing in there as well. That's amazing. So that's our buddy Harrison. He's now a lawyer. He was articling. That's cool. I'm glad to get him going on there. So here we go. We're gonna call Mr. John Hartmann. He is somewhere in California, and let's find out exactly where. Probably Los Angeles, right? If he's still working, I guess he would be. It's earlier in the day for him.
Hello, John Hartmann here.
Hey, John. How are you?
I'm great.
Okay, pretty good. We're going to play with some sound levels here. Is that all right? Okay. Now, I'm very excited. I don't know if you heard the beginning of the show, but the folks know who you are. You're a music manager and everything. At the beginning of the show, I played some Sonny and Cher. What do you think about that?
One of my favorites.
Yeah. Let's just jump right in and say, when did you meet Sonny and Cher? What was that all about?
Know who you are. You're a music manager and everything. At the beginning of the show, I played some Sonny.
Wow, there's a big delay there.
Yes, it is.
Shoot, that's...
Are we on the air?
Yeah, we're on the air. That was a huge delay. Go ahead and say hi there.
Hi there. I'm back.
Okay. I don't know why I heard me 30 seconds later. You heard that too, huh? Okay, let me just ask you again. We're just going to dive in out of nowhere because I wound up using Sonny and Cher. How did you... you're a music manager. How did you meet Sonny and Cher? And tell us about that. They were like an international superstar team.
Well, I was an agent at the William Morris Agency. I was 23 years old. My assignments were scale television shows and game shows. And the first time that rock and roll music was put on prime time network television was on ABC called Shindig. That was a show that I worked on regularly and submitted William Morris clients to. And I happened to be pretty intensely into it. And I represented the director, Dean Whitmore, the house chanteuse, Donna Lauren, the house duet, Dick and Dee Dee. I signed the house quintet, the Shindogs, to William Morris. And I spent a lot of time at their rehearsals. And
God, we got some crazy noise here.
So I was at one of the tapings, and the Rolling Stones were on the stage playing one of their hits, and there was an audience of about 300 kids, and they were all ignoring the Rolling Stones, which I found quite shocking. And so they were calling to someone standing in the wings behind a drape. And I went around the corner and looked to see what had their attention, and it was Sonny Bono. Sonny was the first guy in LA to have long hair. The Beatles had hair to their cheekbones, and the Stones had them to their neck, but no one had them below the neck. And somehow, Sonny and Cher were an unknown act at the time, but the kids knew who they were, so there was an underground movement for them. And this I found very shocking, that they would ignore the Rolling Stones and pay attention to this unknown artist. So later in that show, Sonny and Cher did a song. And a week later, and I thought it was pretty cool, and she was lovely. And about a week later, the ABC network had allowed the cast and crew of Shindig to be on a benefit concert at the Shrine Auditorium in LA. The benefit was for UNICEF. So I had all these clients on the show. It's a live show. It wasn't on television. It was just the audience that had paid to admission. And I was sitting up in the balcony, and Sonny and Cher were on the bill. And when, without introduction, actually, she comes, the song comes on the speakers, and she walks out of the wings alone with a handheld mic, and she hold on a second, she's singing a song called Just You. And so she comes out, and actually it's Sonny who comes out first.
Okay.
And he's singing this song, Just You, and he sits at the edge of the stage, and in the Shrine Auditorium, the first row of seats is just like 3 feet from the stage, downstage edge. And so he's singing right into the faces of the kids. And then when he finishes his verse, she starts the answer verse, and she comes out of the wings. She sits down beside him, and she strokes his long hair. And I got goosebumps over my entire body. And I jumped out of my seat, and I ran down the back stairs and backstage, and by the time I got there, they had finished their song. And I went up to Sonny Bono, and I said, I want to be your agent. And he said, you do? As he knew I represented everybody else on the show. And I said, yes, I do. And so, long story short, I got a picture of them, and I went around the Morris office. I was in the television department, and I had to get someone in the live concert department to co-sign the act with me because someone had to book gigs on that. And so I went around with this photo of them, and I showed it to all the agents. I said, we got to sign this act. And he says, and everybody said, no, don't do it. It's your career. You're going to blow your career. You got lucky on the last signing. I signed an English act called Chad and Jeremy that broke wide open. And, this guy's got long hair. Are you crazy? And he's wearing a fur vest. And I said, no, we got to sign him. And I went to the head of the rock department, and he said, no, don't do it. We don't need this act. We got lots of acts. Book the ones we have. And I said, and I'm only a kid, and I said, I'm going to sign this act with or without you guys. And so they said, okay. The guy says, his name was Ira Oken, and he said, it's your career. If you've got to sign him, sign him. So I got a young agent from the gig department who had just come out from the New York office, and I said, you got to come with me. And so we got in the car, we drove down to Melrose Avenue in Hollywood, and we went into a studio called Gold Star, and we got there just as they were doing the final mix to I Got You, Babe.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And if you didn't know that was a hit, you weren't paying attention. And so he agreed to co-sign him with me, and we went back to the Morris office. We called the manager. They had a manager, Charlie Green.
What's his name, sorry? Charlie what?
Charlie Green and Brian Stone. They were the managers of Sonny and Cher.
Okay.
And so there were a couple of New York hustlers who had come to LA and was signing everything that moved, and as unknown acts.
Yeah.
And so their story is pretty interesting. They started their company by sneaking into the Universal lot and going into an empty house that was used as an office and going into business. Eventually, they got caught and got kicked out, but they already had a roster in the public relations business by then, and they became managers instead. Anyway, so I go get the Morris House agrees to sign them, or Harvey and I do, and they had to go. The record came out. I Got You, Babe, and it was hitting in America out of LA first.
Yeah.
And Sonny and Cher went over to England to promote your release of the single.
Yeah.
How's your throat?
Sure.
And so, anyway, when the long hair was a real anomaly in those days, and Sonny and Cher tried to check into the Hilton Hotel in London, and they refused them.
Because of the guy's hair, because of his hair, which isn't even that long. It's not even, it's like a page boy cut. It's like, you know.
Yeah, it wasn't that long yet. Hair hadn't cut below the shoulders on guys yet.
Yeah.
At least they had in LA. In San Francisco they had, as I learned later. But anyway, so there was such a furor over it, and the song was hitting in America so big that when they came home, there was already a big hit, and Warner Brothers had 2 singles on them under an old act by the name of Caesar and Cleo.
Caesar and what? Sorry, what was that one? Caesar
Cleo.
and Cleo,
like
oh.
Patrick.
Yeah, okay. You dropped out there.
Yeah, so Cleo, Caesar and Cleo, Reprise Records puts out their Caesar and Cleo record, only they changed the name to Sonny and Cher because they're hot. Mm-hmm. And I Got You, Babe goes to #1. As it's coming down, Atlantic puts out the follow-up, so now there's 2 hit the charts. Reprise's record hits the charts. It goes way up. As it's coming down, they released the B-side. They only had 2 sides. And then, so now there's 4 singles in the Billboard Top 100. And they're so hot that when they come back from England, there's thousands of kids in the airport. Literally thousands.
Wow.
And they couldn't get off the plane. So we had to take a limo down to the tarmac, and they had to leave in a limousine, and we went straight to the Morris office because we had a meeting scheduled with the head of Universal Pictures to discuss a movie deal for Sonny and Cher.
Wow.
This was within just a few weeks of the signing.
Yeah.
And so we walked into the office of the head of the company, and we had this meeting, and Cher was bored, and she signaled me she wanted to leave, and so she and I got in the limo. We drove around Beverly Hills and went to all the fancy ladies' stores, and she was already in Vogue magazine, so they were all excited to see her. And then the restaurant for the music business in Hollywood in those days was called Martoni's, and it was on Cahuenga Boulevard, and all the executives from the music business went there every night. So one night, someone picks a fight with Sonny over his hair. And instead of kicking somebody out, they kicked Sonny out. And he went home, and on a brown paper bag at the piano in his garage, he wrote a song called Laugh at Me. The next morning, he came to a meeting at the Morris office and played the song in the conference room off the brown paper bag for the whole, all the agents. And they recorded it at Gold Star that afternoon, and that night it went on the air.
Are you serious? You're going to record it, master it, whatever, mix it, and throw it on the air one day?
When you're hot, you're hot. So then it immediately hits the charts the next week, and now Sonny and Cher had 5 singles in the Billboard Top 100 barely a month after we signed the act.
Why did it take until 2015 for you to win the Heller Award? You should have won it in the 60s.
Well, I don't know why. I was not a manager then. I was an agent.
Okay.
I was a William Morris agent, and I worked on a salary. I didn't get a commission on the act or anything. The company got the commission.
God, we're having a bit of trouble. Just hang on a second, John. Just going to see if we can buffer something. You're kind of.
It might be the extra person on the thing.
It could be, but if just in case, let's have a little listen. Hey, Paul, are you on the line with your brother, or did you disappear? How's it going? Oh.
Okay.
Looks like he's not even there.
Maybe he got off. Anyway, whatever it is.
Okay.
So anyway, suddenly now I'm a 23-year-old kid who looks like a genius.
Yeah.
And then, shortly thereafter, the agent that I brought in, my colleague named Harvey Crosby, long story short, stole the act from Charlie Green and Brian Stone and became Sonny and Cher's manager. Quit the Morris office and went on and was the manager through the TV show and all the enormous success. And I get a call from Charlie Green. And he says, I know it wasn't your fault, and I got this other band. And I said, okay, let's go see him. And we went to a nightclub in San Diego. It was during a fog storm, and it took about 5 hours to drive from LA to San Diego, which is usually a 2.5-hour drive. And
the fog was on the inside of the car or the outside of the car?
Outside of the car, and inside, because we had just gotten into smoking dope.
Ah, there we go. Okay.
And, we smoked about 5 J's on the way to San Diego because it took so long.
Yeah.
And when we got there, the band was on stage, and it was so great that as soon as the song ended, I heard half a song, and I said, I'll sign the act.
And who was this?
Wait a second.
Okay.
And so I've told this story before, and it's all about timing. The punchline.
Okay.
Anyway, so in the middle of the next song, the lead guitar throws down his guitar and runs off the stage. The rest of the band throws down their instruments, and they run after him. I turned to Charlie Green, and I said, what is this? Is this part of the show? And Charlie's as white as a sheet, and he says, no, man, this is bad. And we made our way through the crowd and out into the back door where the band had gone, and laid out over the back of a Corvette, being tended to by a nurse who had her hand in his mouth, trying to keep him from swallowing his tongue, was Neil Young.
Oh, my God.
And the band was Buffalo Springfield.
Sure.
And I committed to sign them on half a song. And it wasn't because I was stoned. It was because it was that great.
That good, yeah. No, I believe that. So, wow, that's incredible. So you found your path. You knew you were on the right thing at that young age.
Yes. And I finally moved out of my parents' house and got a house rented a house in Laurel Canyon. And it was actually before Buffalo Springfield that I moved out of the house, and I was offered pot the first time when I was going to Santa Monica College in 1961, and I turned it down. And I didn't smoke pot until after Chad and Jeremy's big success when I moved into Laurel Canyon. And I remember one night, one of my colleagues from the Morris office and a groupie girl who was actually a barber. She specialized in cutting long hair. All the hair was getting longer. And they held me down. She sat on my chest while he made me smoke pot. And I took a few hits, and I was instantly hooked. And I remember listening to the Rolling Stones real loud on these JBL speakers, and I could literally, this is of course a hallucination, but I could see the notes coming out of the speakers.
Yeah, wow. I know that one. I know that one. I know. The same thing happened to me. Oh my God.
Then I went up on this burned out house up above the hill behind my house, and I stood there and I imagined that I was flying out over the valley and back, and it was pretty much ready to try it again.
Man, that's amazing. That's amazing.
I went on to secretly smoke for quite a long time. I was married to a shindig dancer, and her father was a cop, and her brother was a cop, and smoking was not acceptable, especially even at the Morris office. So it was very much a secret in those days. This is 1963.
Wow.
The Beatles hadn't even broken yet, and so I had to do it very secretly. So I would not smoke all day. I would smoke on my way home. I lived in the valley, so it was a drive, and then I would cover it up with cologne, and somehow fooled my wife for quite some time.
How much would you say? How much would you say that as a I mean, you've had this great career, you're still doing it, and you still know all these people and you're connected to it. So without, necessarily putting anybody on the spot, over all these decades you've been involved with this, how deeply woven into the fabric of what it is that you personally do professionally, the folks that you work with musically, what do you figure the percentage or describe the fabric of cannabis within that whole system? Because as little kids, we hear these records, and I mean, I heard a lot of these records when I was a little kid in the 60s. So I heard a lot of that stuff. My sister was 14 years older than me. So when, all the regular kids, the other kids were listening to Wheels on the Bus and all those Simon Says kind of things, I was listening to the Beatles and the Stones and the Joplins and everything. So, I mean, I got a bit of an early jump on it, but I didn't know and didn't realize the depth of it at that time. And then I remember later on, Paul McCartney got arrested for it in Japan. And my mom was like, oh, that's really bad, and I was like, oh, boy, he got in trouble for doing this. But meanwhile, it's part of the whole industry, isn't it?
Well, it was very much part of the fabric of the industry, and it really was part of a bigger thing, which was the schism that occurred in America between everyone under 30 and everyone over 30.
Right.
It was a complete divide. It was even more divisive than it is today, although this one is still growing and it's going to get just as bad.
Yeah.
But in those days, there was an expression that everyone under 30 used, and the thing was, never trust anyone over 30. And then the adjunct phrase was, turn on, tune in, and drop out.
Right. That's Leary, right? Tim Leary.
Yeah. Tim Leary was the professor of that idea. And he and I later on had an encounter that is interesting, which I'll get to in a minute.
Okay.
But the idea was that if you were against the war, you turned on. And pot was, the expression was turning on was originally applicable to smoking marijuana. And then, as everyone said, it was a gateway drug, and it ultimately led to LSD. And if it wasn't for LSD, the Vietnam War would still be going on. And but it kept the movement pacifistic. LSD was peace and love, not fascist, anti-fascist violence.
Right.
That has happened already in America this round, and it will continue to grow, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But in those days, everybody was pacified, and it became about flower children and a Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. Martin Luther King, Mandela kind of mindset, where there was the potential for violence did not exist in the hippie community. But the idea of if you didn't smoke pot, you weren't on the right side of the line.
Right.
So every musician and everybody who worked with musicians and everybody at every record company smoked pot. And the police were the enemy of pot smokers, and they were universally referred to as pigs. They were not good people in the minds of them. And they didn't like the hippies either, so it was a two-way street. And so, if you didn't smoke pot, the idea of managing a rock and roll band was just out of the question. And it just, didn't happen. And those who did it inside the Morris office, it was done secretly. We never, we hid it from the executive core and the people who owned and ran the company. But once I got really committed to it, I didn't. Well, I went to San Francisco because there was a manager here in LA who when I signed Buffalo Springfield, I went way out on a limb and I parlayed my success with Chad and Jeremy and my success with Sonny and Cher, and I said that this band is going to be bigger than them and it's going to be America's answer to the Beatles.
Wow.
And I was pushing that idea all over the Morris office, and this manager comes up to me and says, "You're wrong." I said, "What are you talking about? These guys are great." And he says, "Yeah, but they're not what's going to happen next." I said, "What are you talking about? They're going to be the next big thing." And he says, "No, the next big thing is coming out of San Francisco." And so I said, "Oh yeah, what do you mean?" And he says, "You don't know what's happening." And I thought, I'm 23 years old. I got 2 hit acts, and I think a bigger act coming. And I think I know everything because that's how young kids think.
Yeah.
Right? And so I went up to San Francisco with another colleague named Skip Taylor. And we went to Winterland. It was, I think it was October 18, 1966. And Winterland was a skating rink that they turned into a rock and roll venue. Bill Graham was the promoter. And the bill was Jefferson Airplane, Grateful Dead, and Paul Butterfield Blues Band.
How'd you get out alive?
Well, first of all, I'd never heard of any of those acts.
Oh, okay.
But they drew 5,000 people to Winterland.
Yeah.
And I went, "This is crazy. Unknown acts don't draw.
Yeah.
You can't fill 5,000 seats with, with unknown acts." And it kind of blew my mind. And there were 2 other things that blew my mind that night. One was what they call liquid light shows, where they put different colored oils in a dish, a clear dish, and they put it on a magnifying screen, and they pulsate the dish to the beat of the music, and it throws colored lights all over the walls.
Oh, wow. I think I've seen that kind of thing. Yep.
Yeah, you see it in any Jefferson Airplane video.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that blew my mind. And then the next thing I saw was even more mind-boggling, and that was every guy in the room had hair below his shoulder.
Yeah.
And the longest I'd seen was Sonny. So that, really upset my apple cart. And Skip Taylor and I went out to Lookout Point in Sausalito and looked back at the city and said, "We got to bring this to L.A." So we went back to the Morris office and said, "We got to open a San Francisco office. There's going to be the next big explosion. All these bands are going to come out of Frisco, and if we have an office there, we can capture this and make it bigger than these hippie commie managers will ever do, and we got to do it." And they went, "You guys sit down, shut up, and stay out of San Francisco." Well, if you have seen, the golden ring, and they tell you don't grab it, you gotta say, "Uh-oh, something's wrong." So then Skip and I schemed on how to bring it to San Francisco. And we were in the process of signing a band to the Morris office named Canned Heat.
Sure.
And instead of, we decided to leave the Morris office and start a nightclub. When we decided to do it for Buffalo Springfield, we called it the Stampede. Except the Morris office didn't want to do it, so we left and we changed the name to the Kaleidoscope. And we had realized that our bands in those days happened out of venues. The Beatles came out of the Cave in Liverpool. The Jefferson Airplane was coming out of the Phil. The Grateful Dead was coming out of the Avalon. Johnny Rivers came out of the Whiskey A Go-Go. The Birds came out of the Troubadour. And we said, we gotta have an act to break in our nightclub. So we signed Canned Heat for management instead of agency. And we went about raising the money to open a nightclub. And while that's going on, we had to get ourselves fired from the Morris office because otherwise we didn't get unemployment.
Oh, I see.
So we started smoking in the office at night and just being totally obnoxious to everyone. And by the time we got fired, we had the money and we had the whole Kaleidoscope set up, and we released a venue, and we structured the venue. It was an old sound stage where the Steve Allen television show had come from. And we configured it for a capacity of 700 people. And it was opening night, and we booked the Airplane, the Dead, and our band Canned Heat.
Wow.
And we showed up that afternoon. We painted the place. We created the best sound system rock had ever been on up to that point. And we went there to get ready for sound check, and there was a notification on the door that said, you can't go in here. If you do, you're going to be under arrest. It was a restraining order from the owners of the building who had gotten complaints from all the little old ladies in the neighborhood. They didn't want hippies in their neighborhood.
Right.
So I'm standing there, and all the kids who worked for us, like 20 kids who had done all the work on the building and painted it and everything. And it's this guy named Bill Kirby says, don't tell me we did all this for nothing. And I'm standing there, and I got $60,000 left in the bank. And I didn't want to, and the Airplane and the Dead were already in town. And I made a decision to move the concert that day for that night to some other venue. And luckily, I knew the assistant manager at the Ambassador Hotel, where the Coconut Grove was.
Oh, yeah.
And I called him up and I said, is the Coconut Grove booked tonight? He says, yeah. What's wrong? I said, I need a venue. I need a venue tonight for 2,000, or at least, for 700 people. And I got these bands booked. And he said, well, I got the ballroom. It holds 2,000. I said, okay, I'll take it. And he says, well, the manager's out of town. I guess I'm in charge. You got it. Because I'd done him a favor. I had booked his wife as the sidekick on the first Regis Philbin television show.
Oh, my God.
A woman named Susan Barrett. She was a Marilyn Monroe-esque dancer, really smart, really did great with Regis.
Susan Baird?
Barrett, Barrett.
Okay.
Anyway, so Uno owed me, and he paid off, and in one day we moved the entire sound system, went on the radio, got the light show set up in the Ambassador, and told everybody that it was now at the Ambassador Hotel. When that was all accomplished, I went home for a shower, and I came back, and I'm walking in the building, and I passed two hippies. You could always tell who was under 30 because they always had longer hair, they had love beads, and they had flowery clothes, right? And I went, oh, okay, that's two. And then I got up to the second floor where the ballroom was, and these kids who worked for us are selling tickets at the door. And I walk up, and they're grinning from ear to ear, and I said, what? And they said, take a look. And I opened the door, and the Airplane was on stage, and there were 2,000 people in the room.
Wow.
Almost 3 times what we could have gotten in our own venue. And it was a huge success. We got amazing reviews. And for the next week, I had the Doors booked, and the Doors had broken wide open. And I went to Uno. I said, can we have it for next week? And he says, no, it's booked. So we went out, and we got a nightclub on the Sunset Strip that was called Ciro's, Ciros. And it was a famous nightclub for basically jazz music and comics. And today, that venue is the Comedy Store, which is a huge thing in the comedy world. And the series I'm Dying Up Here is based on that Comedy Store venue and the lady who ran.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we moved the Doors in there and changed the advertising and put out a poster, and there was a mile-long line trying to get in. So that was a huge success. The next week, we thought we had Paul Butterfield Blues Band booked. It fell apart. We snagged an act that was being heavily promoted at the time from MCA Records and said they better be good, because if they're not, they'll never work this town again. And they weren't good, and so...
Who was that? Do you know?
It was called Fever Tree, that band.
Fever Tree?
Fever Tree. And it was a brand new act that MCA had put a huge billboard on Sunset that had 3D. It was like a woman in a swamp pulling a band on the raft, and the band was on the raft, and it was 3D, so it looked like she was actually pulling them. Anyway, it was a big hype, and the band got to play, and they weren't good, and their career ended. It's pretty much that day. Anyway, so now we shut down, and we went out and looked for another venue, and we ended up leasing an amazing, legendary venue on Sunset Boulevard, not on the Strip, but in Hollywood, called the Earl Carroll Theater, which was built in the 30s as a nightclub for stage shows and dancing, and it has an amazing history. And we went in there. We built a dance floor out of an old bowling alley. We bought an old bowling alley, the lanes, and installed it in this place because the whole concept of that era was dance concerts. You had to be able to dance, and the Earl Carroll Theater, which had been the Moulin Rouge in the 50s, it was actually built in the 30s, didn't have a dance floor. So we built a dance floor, and and our opening night was Jefferson Airplane, Grateful Dead, Canned Heat, once again. And in both situations, the one at the Ambassador and the one in our own venue, all three acts played for free.
Oh, wow. Nice.
They didn't charge us anything because they wanted us to bring their San Francisco to play, and we ended up bringing all the San Francisco acts down here first. Big Brother and the Holding Company, Moby Grape, the Charlatans, all the great bands in San Francisco. We were their debut performance in Los Angeles, including the Dead, and we went on and had another amazing adventure that is too long and too fabulous to tell now.
Oh gosh!
But it was all through that. We smoked all day, every day.
Wow! Gee whiz!
And it was the time of my life.
How would you say your health has been over the course of your life? Have you had a pretty good time?
My health has been extremely good for this reason. After the Kaleidoscope closed, I ended up managing a little band called Rockin' Foo, and my brother Phil had just graduated from high school, and he came over to my house one day with a book called Yoga, Youth, and Reincarnation.
Okay.
And I read the book, and I got into yoga big time, and I became a health nut, and I've been practicing yoga and vegetarianism ever since, and that, along with meditation, has kept me young, vital, and healthy, and I've never had a major disease. I've broken a bunch of bones driving stoned.
Oh, yeah.
I had, I think, 5 or 6 auto accidents. Matter of fact, I once calculated that I wrecked every car I had except the fastest one.
Really?
At the height of success, I drove an Aston Martin DBS, and I drove it one time 155 miles an hour, but I never wrecked it. Anyway, so my health is very good and still is to this day. And I'm 77 years old. I get guessed in my early 60s by people all the time. So I'm not as old looking as I am.
Sure.
Apparently.
You still work professionally in the music business too, right?
No, I actually retired from the music business last year. I had been teaching music business at Musicians Institute in Hollywood, and that got me into Loyola Marymount University, where I taught for 10 years. I was Professor of the Year 3 times in the School of Film and Television. And then I taught at UCLA for 7 years. And all along, I was dabbling, kind of looking for an act. I found one at LMU, a girl named Simone Battle. I thought she was going to be a superstar, but she wouldn't follow my advice.
Yeah.
And so I let her go. And when all my advice turned out to be absolutely correct, instead of coming back to me, and I invited her to do so, and I even wrote my book, Rock Building Bands in the Digital Age, as a guidebook for her, she killed herself instead.
Oh, gosh. That's too bad.
My heart. She was in a band called Girl, GRL, I think it was on RCA.
Yeah.
And produced by Dr. Luke. And I told her that kind of band wasn't going to make it today, and she should not do it. And she insisted on doing it. And they tried real hard, but they couldn't break the act, and it broke her.
That's too bad. What do you mean that it wouldn't work today? What exactly about it wouldn't work?
It was the 5 hottest chicks you ever saw in one place in your life.
Oh, okay. And that's not going to work?
It was. No, I knew it wasn't going to work because it was the lady who put it together was the manager of the Pussycat Dolls.
Right.
And she was trying to duplicate her success. And that was not going to happen in the current market.
Right.
Part of being a great manager is having vision and knowing what's real and what's not real, because I never met an artist in 60 years of management that didn't think it was going all the way to the big time. Not one, ever, right? And 90% of them were absolutely wrong. They weren't even going to make a living.
Right.
So a manager has to know what to go on and what to not go on. And I told her, okay, this is going to be a learning experience for you. When it's over, come back to me. I was leading her down the direction that Adele later had huge success with.
Wow.
And she got into this cute all-girl band that, danced and sang, didn't play instruments,
oh God,
and didn't write their songs, and wasn't going to make it. And when she realized that it wasn't going to happen, she hung herself in her apartment.
So it was really like a poorly conceived, never going to work sort of a Monkees, right? Where they're not really doing much of they're just sort of puppeting along with something like a little.
Well, yeah, I mean, but see, the Monkees was actually a brilliant idea at the time.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what they're doing a thing where they're not really gonna play the instruments and just jump around and just be cute, and that's supposed to work. That's not gonna work, is it? I mean, the best people to do that were the Spice Girls, maybe.
Yeah, well, the Spice Girls and the Pussycat Dolls were similar things. I mean, that was in the 80s when that kind of thing had MTV to hype it.
Yeah.
And it worked because they were hot. But to do it in the market, that Simone Battle was entering, it wasn't good. I knew 100% that even with Sony distributed record label, Dr. Luke, the hottest producer of the day, the best choreographers, and a lot of money, that band was going to fail. And when it did, she couldn't take it, and she didn't come back to me. She broke my heart instead.
Yeah, that's too bad. Well, let's put a happier note on it. I mean, this fella also didn't go the distance, but if I don't ask you about Elvis Presley, I'll be kicking myself.
That's even better story. When you start, the William Morris Agency trains their agents from the mailroom up. They don't hire, at least in those days, they didn't hire agents from the outside or other agencies. What they did was they put you in the mailroom at $50 a week, and when I started in 1961, and they tested you in every possible way to see what kind of character you had, what kind of intelligence you had, what kind of humility you had, and if you were a persevering type. And so getting the job was hard in the first place because someone had to recommend you. I was luckily recommended by an agent there, and I was actually an actor looking for work, but I didn't know how to get an effective agent. So I lied about being an actor, said I wanted to be an agent, and got the job because I was trying to find out how to get an agent. Right. And 2 days into it, I said, I can do this better than any of these guys. And I started running, and 6 months later, I was the fastest guy in the mailroom. Well, every year, William Morris had a guy from the mailroom who worked directly for Colonel Tom Parker at the height of Elvis's movie career. He was a liaison between the Elvis camp and the Morris office. And it was just the colonel hustling a free staff member, and it was I was a flunky gopher type. But they sent me, the kid who worked for them, for Colonel full time, was named Irv Schechter, and he went in the Air Force Reserves every summer for 2 weeks. And the colonel, tough old buzzard that he was, insisted that somebody replace him for those 2 weeks as the gopher.
Okay.
they always sent the guy who was least likely to screw up because they didn't want the colonel complaining. So I got the gig. When I went over there for what was supposed to be 2 weeks, and it was amazing to see, the King of Rock and Roll's operation at the highest possible level. And 2 weeks in, I went to the colonel on the Friday. I said, "Colonel, thanks for the opportunity. Irving will be back on Monday," and it was really amazing. He says, "Oh, no, Johnny, you come back on Monday too." I said, "Well, sir, they're expecting me back at the office." He says, "No, I'll handle that." End of discussion. So the colonel ended up keeping me on his staff for the better part of a year, and it was just amazing. And I was we were at Paramount Pictures. The colonel always got something for free in every deal he did, and what he got in a multiple picture deal with the great producer Hal Wallace was half the second floor of the main building at Paramount Pictures for free. 7-room suite. Wow. And
nice.
Every square inch was covered with a picture of Elvis.
You just have to manage Elvis to get that perk.
Well, he was, his deal with Elvis was, "I'll only manage you."
Right.
But you have to do whatever I say and I get half.
Right.
And so Elvis went along and that was their relationship. But the colonel was a tough old nut.
Yeah.
And he didn't, he like when he signed Elvis to RCA Records, he got a full-time RCA employee on his staff named Graylin Landon, who was a press agent. So all of Elvis's press didn't emanate from the record company, it emanated from the colonel's office by this guy Graylin. So that was just the colonel's MO. He always got something for free in the deal. And in the Morris office, he wanted three free things. He wanted an office in the building, he wanted a full-time employee on his staff, and he wanted a free station wagon, gassed, insured, and serviced by William Morris.
Station wagon.
Yeah, they gave him the station wagon. That was easy. They had a whole fleet.
Yeah.
They gave him a guy from the mailroom. That's only $50 a week. No big deal.
Yeah.
But an office in the William Morris building was hugely expensive. So Mr. Lashvogel, the head of William Morris, said to him, "Listen, Colonel, there's no office in this building good enough for you, except mine. So whenever you're in the building, you come and use my office, and I will move into my other office." And so Lashvogel kind of outsharped him in that move, but he got the staff member and eventually me and the car.
Wow.
And so anyway, I met Elvis on the set of a movie called Girls, Girls, Girls one day in a group of people, just to say hello and shake hands. And then one day, they moved over to MGM Studios to make a movie called It Happened at the World's Fair.
Yeah.
And I was left alone in this 7-room suite with all these pictures of Elvis on the walls, and my Virgo brain couldn't take it, and I had nothing to do except I went to all the studios where Elvis ever made a movie and collected his fan mail, went back to the office, read it, and if anything was interesting, I sent it to this warehouse in Madison, Tennessee. And my other job was to buy every newspaper and every magazine and go through it, and anything about Elvis I would send to this warehouse. But I never, I only got like a few phone calls a day. One in the morning at 9 o'clock to make sure I was there. One at 5 to 1 to let me go to lunch. One at 5 after 2 to make sure I was back. And one at 5 to 5 to tell me to go home.
Wow, pretty punctual.
Yeah. So the rest of the time, I took down all the pictures and I put them all back up. They were all laid out in the 7-room suites asymmetrically. And I took them all down and put them all back up symmetrically, where the wallet-sized calendars were the ring around the top of the walls, and then the certain size went in the middle, and it turned it into this rather pretty work of art. And after they finished the movie at MGM, they came back. No one ever mentioned, I don't even know if they noticed it, but no one ever mentioned that all the pictures were changed. That was funny.
That's amazing. So, that's a great start. That's an amazing story.
While they were over at MGM one day, I got a call to bring these papers over to the colonel. And in those days I was only making $50 a week, and I had this 59 Ford Galaxy convertible where the top was split from stem to stern on both sides, and the thing was so funky it looked like it could grow moss on it.
Oh, wow.
And the colonel loved to be driven around in this old car, right?
Yeah.
He thought it was. He'd sit in the back like it was a limo, and I would drive him. So I drive on. I have a pass to drive onto the lot, and I go to his office, and I walk in, and I go into his private office, and I hand him the papers. Oh, Johnny, come on! Yes, and I give him the papers. He says, "Oh," and he says, "You know Elvis." And I look over, and Elvis is standing, leaning against the wall. And I got to tell you, it was like being in a room with a fire. I mean, it was so intense to be in a room with this absolutely gorgeous human being who is the king of rock and roll and a major movie star and a guy I was a fan of since high school in Canada.
Wow. What year was that? Like, how old were you about?
At this time, I was maybe 22.
22, and there he is standing right in front of you, and you're telling me you had certain way. There was an indescribable air of greatness. Is that how we can?
It was an aura like as hot as a fire.
Wow.
And it was like looking at a fireplace. Only it was him standing there, and he says, "You know Elvis." And I look over, and Elvis walks toward me, and he sticks out his hand, and I stick out mine. We shake hands. He says, "How you?" He says, "How do you do, sir?"
Oh, wow.
Now, he calls me sir because I'm wearing a suit and a tie.
Sure.
Which was compulsory at William Morris.
Yeah.
Not because I'm older. I'm actually much younger than him. By at least, I think, maybe a few years at least.
Yeah.
We probably calculate that. But anyway, so I just shook hands with the king of rock and roll, and I'm like walking on air. And the colonel says, "Well, wait outside for me, and you can drive me home." And so I turn and I start to leave the room, and Elvis walks over and he opens the door for me, and he says, "See ya, man."
Oh, wow.
As only he could.
God.
And so the colonel gets in the car. We drive out, and we're driving through the main. How's your throat?
I'm good. I'm okay. I just had to clear it up. Yeah.
So we're driving through the main gate, and the president of MGM Pictures is walking toward the gate. And the gate is from the 30s, and it's very narrow, and the car almost fills the gate. And so the colonel says, "Stop the car, Johnny." And I stop right in the middle of the arch of the gate. And he waits for Robert Whiteman, the president of MGM, to get right up next to the car. And then he sticks his hand through the hole in the roof, and he says, "Mr. Whiteman." And Whiteman steps over, and he looks down into the hole, and he takes Colonel's hand and shakes it. He says, "Are you in there, Colonel?" And the Colonel says, "Yes, sir. Make sure you go by the set and say hello to Elvis." And he said, "Yes, sir, I will." And they said, "Okay, Johnny, drive on." And I drive away, and the Colonel laughed all the way home.
Oh, that's amazing. Hey, listen, when you were with Elvis, I mean, this is my brief, I don't have any kind of story like that, but I did go to Graceland. And when you were with Elvis and he was alive and everything, obviously it wasn't when he was at his larger size yet when you met him, right? I mean, he was right at the perfect physical height. So when you met him, like, how tall of a man? Because the thing that really struck me when I was in Graceland, you can go on a tour there. They have a lot of the clothing that he wore on stage. So there's that famous, the iconic white suit with all of the sparkles, and I couldn't believe how small it was. I mean,
yeah, I would say that he was no taller than me. I think he was probably about 5'9".
5'9".
And speaking of his clothing, the Colonel was also a very cheap guy. That's why he wanted everything free. And one day, Irving he was moving from an apartment in Hollywood, the Colonel was, to a house in Beverly Hills, and he made Irving and I take all his stuff, everything but the furniture, in the station wagon over to the new house. And while we were doing that, I found that gold lame jacket in the Colonel's closet, and I wore it all afternoon.
Oh, that's amazing! You're wearing Elvis. You would have had a selfie back then. No, you wouldn't have been able to do that.
We didn't have a selfie. We should have gone to one of those photo booths.
Yeah, lost selfie moment. Look at this. I got Elvis's jacket on. That's amazing. Oh my God! So you would say that you use overall throughout your life. You would say you've been using cannabis on a what would we call a regular basis, whatever that might be for you. That's part of your daily makeup or your weekly. You make sure you're close to it from time to time.
Let me put it this way. I smoked my first J on my way to the office. I sat at my desk all day. This is as a manager,
right?
Not as. And I smoked all day, every day. Chain smoked it, and intermittently took acid, mescaline, psilocybin. There was a thing that happened among the hippie community where the idea was they lied about pot. What else did they lie about?
Yeah.
And the assumption was they lied about everything.
Yeah, we're on that now, and we're really balls deep in that kind of mindset these days, I guess.
Yeah. So whenever a new drug came along, it was kind of incumbent upon you to at least try it once, just so you knew what it was.
Yeah.
And things came along, DMT. There was even one summer that was really classic during the Kaleidoscope era, where the great chemist Owsley Stanley, who made all the great LSD, made synthetic cannabis, a powder that you could drop or snort.
Wow.
And it was so hard to make and so deadly if you didn't make it right that he only made 1 pound in his entire life. And I actually ended up with an ounce of that. And that was not the greatest cannabis high I've ever had. That was absolutely the full impact of everything cannabis can be, locked for the duration of a couple of hours. And it was pretty amazing. Otherwise, I smoked pretty much all the time for years and years. And all of our clients smoked. One of our clients, a great comedy act on Columbia Records called the Firesign Theater.
Oh, sure, yeah.
They wouldn't even sign with us until we confirmed that we smoked.
That's the best.
Yeah, and so anyway, I smoked constantly, chain smoked virtually until I ended up teaching. And when I started teaching, I quit for the semester, and I would, smoke this, on the last day of school. I'd be smoking before I left the campus, and then I'd smoke all through the break, and then, so I was just dealing with a text, and so I smoked again, regularly, and then. Last year, I got some clones from a company in San Jose, California called King Clone Brand.
Sure.
And I grew the most fantastic pot I'd ever seen. I had I think 8 plants out here in my yard, and I had so much pot, and it was so good, and it was free, that I probably oversmoked, and I ended up getting a sinus problem.
Oh, wow.
And so I haven't smoked since New Year's Eve.
Oh, wow.
And for the first time in my life, I, other than short periods of semester length, which at the longest was 16 weeks, I haven't smoked now in 6 months.
Gee whiz.
And, it's interesting. I still feel real good. Like I use pot pretty much as what Chad Stewart from Chad and Jeremy called a calmative, to reduce stress and kind of as a reward for doing the insane work of being a manager.
Right.
A lot of crazy people.
But
right?
you feel good not being on it for 6 months, 7 months.
Yeah, even when I quit for school, it was hard for me to kick. I would have so much in my system that the withdrawal would actually be quite intense, and I would get uptight and ornery and stressed out and uncomfortable until I went through a week or two, and then it would start to mellow out, and I ended up feeling, just as good straight as I did high. And so now I'm 6 months into being straight.
It still feels good. Just don't change it.
I feel fabulous.
Yeah.
You know, just it's whichever camp I'm in at the time is the one I prefer.
Right. Okay, well, listen, this is great. Before we go, I do want to spend a little bit of time on your current efforts. So these all would have come from your smoke-filled mind, your cannabis-fueled mind, because in 2008, and it's still going on. I mean, of course, you've had this great musical career, and we should also mention, I need to mention some of the other acts. I mean, we could do a story about each one, but we don't really have time. But Peter, Paul, and Mary, of course, Poco, and then your brother Phil designed their very iconic Horse album cover. America, another one he also did. Crosby, and Nash, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, Dwight Tilley, all kinds of people. Let me just quickly ask you this. What was the circle of connection between you and, say, Poco and America and your brother? Like, did you bring him in? Were they looking for album artists, or how did that work out?
Phil was I had a company called Hartmann and Goodman. Basically, I got involved in that circle with Buffalo Springfield, which is where Poco came from. That was Richie Furay. Crosby, Stills, and Nash. That was Stephen Stills. Neil Young. They were all in Poco or in Buffalo Springfield.
Yeah.
So once I was their agent, and I really delivered for them. I mean, they got a #1 record on their first record, right? It was actually I think it was their 4th single, but it went to #1 for what it's worth. It's in every movie about the 60s. It was about a riot on Sunset Strip when they tore down a nightclub called Pandora's Box. So that started it, and then eventually what happened was I had, after the Kaleidoscope closed, I kind of retired because I wanted to be an actor, writer, film producer, director guy in my early career. That's really what I was studying for and training for. And so I started screenwriting, and I was in LA one time, and there was a place where all the pop dealers hung out called the Troubadour Bar. It was a nightclub. And I was in there one night, and David Geffen, the legendary guy who managed and built DreamWorks and he made more money in the music industry than anybody else ever. And he was managing Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young and Joni Mitchell and Laura Nyro and a bunch of other acts, and he was starting Asylum Records. And I run into him, and he tells me that Neil's here. And Neil, he said, I'll go get him. And he brings Neil out to see me. And Neil Young gives me this big, huge hug, and he stands there. He's holding me in his arms like he would a chick. And we're exchanging small stuff, and then he lets go of me, and he takes it 2 or 3 steps away, and he turns back. And now this is the height of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, right?
Yeah.
Deja. And everybody in the room at a packed bar is staring at him, and he says to me, "Thank you, man." And I kind of broke into a giggle and said, "Sure, Neil." And Geffen saw that Neil loved me, and Neil was his toughest case. Neil was the most critical artist. He was the most powerful. He was the most intelligent and most creative, and he was always giving Geffen a hard time. And so Geffen, invited me to lunch, and he kept taking me to lunch. And finally, he was trying to get me to come to work for him. And I said, "No, I want to be a screenwriter. I don't want to have a job. I don't do jobs anymore." And he says, "Listen, come and do this. You got to help me out. If you're still here in a year, I'll give you a piece." Well, a year later, I had broken Neil Young's record. The album was Harvest, and the single was Heart of Gold, and both went to #1. I booked his biggest tour up to that time, and made him a ton of money, and I had all these other acts. We'd taken on the Eagles. I'm one of the Cowboys. We actually put the Eagles together with John Boylan, the great record producer who manages Linda Ronstadt,
right,
even to this day. And we ended up, I worked for Geffen. I became a partner. As happens a lot of times with moguls, we had a fight, and I quit Geffen to go manage with my own company with my assistant, whose name was Harlan Goodman. We became Hartmann and Goodman, and we signed Poco because they had just fired us because it became obvious to them that we only signed them, Geffen signed them to steal Richie Furay to be in a band called Souther Hillman and Furay, which is going to be his next Crosby, Stills and Nash. So I was in the middle of that. I didn't like it. Geffen and I had other problems getting along, and so Harlan and I left, signed Poco, and then we got them rolling without Richie Furay, and actually took them to greater heights than they'd ever been. Our success with them attracted America, who I had managed as part of Geffen's company, what Geffen Roberts' company was called. Elliot Roberts was his partner. And so Crosby and Nash were being neglected after we left, and they came over. And as soon as I had them, I called Stills as manager, and we put Crosby, Stills, and Nash back together.
Wow.
And then we had a huge success with them, which attracted Peter, Paul, and Mary, who had been broken up for years. And our attorney, Bruce Gray Cal, he's Ringo's attorney for his entire career. And he represented Mary Travers. He delivered Peter, Paul, and Mary to us. We did their reunion tour and album. And, at the height of Hartmann and Goodman, we were simultaneously the managers of Peter, Paul, and Mary, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, America, Poco, the Firesign Theater, Michael Murphy, Dwight Twilley, and Happy Baby Band. So we were the biggest management company in music at that time. And then at the height of that, I got a chance to produce a movie called Hard Country based on a Michael Murphy song. And that was Kim Basinger's first starring role in a feature film. And I got the old fever back to write movies, which is what I'd always wanted to do. And leading us up to the rest of your question, I kind of had only, once Simone Battle wasn't ready to take management advice from me, I pretty much, I put together, I think, one other band, and it broke up before its debut. And I decided to give up the music business altogether. And that was aided by, a year ago, last May, I was in an auto accident where I broke my back. And I had to take a year off to recover, which I've done, and I'm back to normal. And but in the interim, I stopped teaching at UCLA. I was teaching music business, and got back into my screenwriting. And I just turned in the 29th draft of a script I started writing in 1979.
Wow!
And it's in play. And as you called, I'm in the middle of a rewrite on a screenplay called Hourglass. The log line on the first my teachers, my screenwriting teachers always said, write about what you know best. And what I knew best was the music business. So Dream Street is the name of the script, and it's about the music business that we've been discussing, the 70s era.
Okay, real quick, we got a couple of questions. I've got a couple more questions, and we have to get going. Real quick, your call. Why did the show Vinyl not work?
I don't know. I never saw it. I didn't want to see it because I didn't want it to interfere with my writing of Dream Street, which is what was happening in California at that very time.
I see.
I think I'll probably go watch it now, just out of curiosity that I finished my script. The log line on my script is, an unscrupulous manager, desperate to save his crumbling empire, gathers the drug-shattered iconic rock band that made him famous and puts them on the comeback trail.
Oh, that's amazing. I love the sound of that. Hey, and then slightly away from that, I mean, talking about music, of course, your whole career has been centered around that. Tell me a little bit about, and then we have to get going soon, but I want you to close out. First of all, if there's anywhere that people can get a hold of you, if you have a Twitter handle, etc. But I really want to hear about the Holodyne Foundation. You've been doing that for 10 years. Tell people what that is, because as I understand it, you know, you're trying to foster a new generation of music. And so what exactly are you bringing to people? And with the coda on that question being, I don't know, man, I just hear a lot of stuff these days. I don't really like it. So am I old, or are you trying to help people bring new good stuff? You know, we can go more with Adele and these other, the quality of acts that you've been wrestling with over the past decades. Do we have any ways to pull characteristics and find things like that about musicians? Do we have another bevy of talent ahead of us, or is it all just manufactured pap or somewhere in between?
New talent will come along. Paul Simon said it in a song. Every generation puts a hero up the pop charts. The hero for this generation has not arrived yet. The holodyne, the mission statement for the holodyne is to ensure that the next generation of music belongs to those who create it. Now, here's how it works. The website, Holodigm, HLOLODIGM, like paradigm. It's hologram meets paradigm, music.com or the holodigm or 20 different misspellings. You'll get there. And what you have there is more than 30 hours of classroom lectures. The exact course that I taught at LMU that those students paid $4,000 to take is online, available, absolutely free.
Can you just say that again one more time for people, because this is like a massive gift and I want folks to understand that. Just tell us that one more time.
Okay. The holodyne, whose mission statement is to ensure that the next generation of music belongs to those who create it, not transnational corporations,
right,
contains more than 30 hours of actual classroom lectures. The entire course that I taught at Musicians Institute in Hollywood, Loyola Marymount University for 10 years. They paid $4,000 to take that course. I taught it at UCLA for 7 years. I was Professor of the Year in those institutions 4 different times. And the course is the absolute truth. And the textbook that goes with it that I wrote, called Rock Building Bands in the Digital Age, is available on that website absolutely free. I have given away totally thousands of copies online for free. You can download it. And between the lectures in that book, it tells you exactly what's happening in the music business today, exactly how to direct your own career, and how to end up owning your own masters, your own publishing, and your own merchandising, and how to generate a career that, if you're talented, and trust me, like I said earlier, I never met a band that didn't think it was going all the way, and 90% of them won't even make a living. 1% will make 90% of the money. But if you think you're great, and trust me, good isn't enough anymore, it has to be great, then you go there, you read that book, and you watch those lectures. There are also guest lectures from artists, managers, producers, other people on that website that will tell you how this game is played, how it works, and how to operate it. The whole course was designed to train personal managers in the music industry. And there's the holodyne itself is a visualization that I created so that I can show you how to play the game of showbiz in a 1.5 hour lecture with a visual that shows you what it looks like. The holodyne is what showbiz would look like if it was a board game.
Amazing. And, that is absolutely amazing. That's fantastic. So look that up, HOLODIGM, holodyne, like hologram and paradigm. Look it up. Yeah. It's been going on for 10 years now. Thank you so much for that gift. And
it's holodynemusic.com or theholodyne.com. Okay?
Amazing.
If any questions, people can address me directly at John Hartmann, JOHN, 22 @gmail.com. I welcome anybody who wants to have a career in music to contact me with their questions, and I will give you free advice, because music is the most powerful tool on the planet. And it used to be in service to humanity. Today, it is in service to the greedy people who are doing it for the gold chains, the Bentleys, and the babes, not to change the world.
Right.
And I've trained and worked with the best musicians who devoted their careers to fixing what's broken on this planet and changing the war and turning away from war to peace.
Well, that says it all right there. Thank you so much for everything you've done through the decades, working with those bands, putting it together, being instrumental in helping us listen to some of the finest music ever, and this ethos that you've put together for the last 10 years to continue that. Folks, I hope you understand how generous a gift that is. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Alan.
Just for the heck of it, we're going to throw on a little Fever Tree. This is San Francisco Girls. And these guys aren't very good, according to you. So this is
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it blew their career because they had an opportunity that they didn't fulfill. They weren't ready. They were a young baby band.
Right.
They were putting up on this place with Airplane and the Doors, who were seasoned veterans.
It's pretty trippy.
Yeah, but I'd like to hear it myself.
That's great stuff. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on the show, Mr. John Hartmann. I hope it was okay for you. We had a great time. We learned a lot of cool stuff. So thanks very much.
I'm glad to speak to everybody in the homeland. I miss you guys.
You too. Yes, don't forget, folks, John was born here as a Canadian before he was absconded with down to the States and gave us some of the finest music of the last 50 years. This track here may not be in that canon, but it's still kind of fun to listen to. Thanks very much, John.
Thank you.
Cheers. Fever Tree, folks. Wow. Yeah, it's kind of trippy, actually. I've never heard of these guys. That's the part that really interested me. I was like, who are they? I mean, you know who all the crummy ones are. It just it's hard to deal that song came out 50 years ago. All right, so now where are we? We have to close this show out. We've only got a couple of seconds left to go. Not really much at all, but I do have another quick couple of things I got to read here for you. Remember, just before we had John come on, that the chief medical officer here in Toronto, which is a pretty large city, is proposing in a report called A Public Health Approach to Drug Policy that will be has already been presented to the city's health board. This is a great idea. Have a look at Portugal and what they do about all of this. And in Australia, we will go out on this final bit of news. In Australia, unfortunately, they're so uptight there. We have our friend Jenny Hallam, who is in kind of a lot of trouble. And we don't know how that's going to go. But this is not a good piece of news to understand gee whiz, listen to this nonsense. While other parts of the world are decriminalizing cannabis, South Australia plans to quadruple fines and introduce prison terms. The South Australian Liberal Party ran a war on drugs slogan in April, and today it delivered on that promise. What are you doing over there, folks? Announcing new laws to be debated in Parliament this week, including the proposals of a maximum fine for cannabis possession of $2,000 plus a 2-year jail term, a cap on a number of times a person can enter a drug diversion program, allowing drug-sniffing dogs into schools. Attorney General Vicky Chapman says the changes would make the penalty for possession of marijuana the same as it is for heroin. Hey, if that makes any sense to you, you're mentally unwell. So write your congressman or your whoever it is in Australia that you need to speak with. I mean, that is just, it's just not on, you know? I don't understand why they don't understand. Wow. Anyway, this has been Green Crush. Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. Thanks again to our guest, John Hartmann, brother of Paul and Phil. If there are any more Hartmann brothers, please send your resume to the show. We have a soft spot for all of you. If there's any other hidden siblings out there, any other Hartmans, you've all done well so far. So thanks for listening to the show, and do join us again next week, won't you? And let's end it right there.
Hi, I'm Timmy.
And I'm Mary Jane. He's the newbie.
She's the doobie. And this is the show
where we
tote
cannabis.
Talk.
From both sides.
Is that even possible?